Disco?
Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the Data Ethics and Privacy and Hyper-Personalisation talk. Before we get started today, I'm just going to do a short introduction into Barclays and our Fintech Venture Studio. So for those of you that aren't aware, Barclays has a long history of collaborating and investing in fintechs. We've been doing it for around a decade now. And we have 2 RISE sites in London and New York, where we're co-located with 120 fintechs. We have 150 fintechs in our virtual community, and we have 190 that have graduated from our program. So we have been doing this for a long time, and last year I'm pleased to announce that we launched a new suite of programs, one of which is called the Barclays Fintech Venture Studio, powered by Rainmaking. So that program is particularly here to, we're on a mission to ideate, quickly prototype, and support to scale innovative new propositions, products, and services. And we do that in collaboration with our internal teams, with the fintech ecosystem, and our corporate clients. As part of that program, we understood that with the huge seismic shifts in financial services, we really wanted to understand quite deeply what are the biggest sectors that we want to look into and where we want to draw our focus. So we developed our first innovation thesis. And I'm going to show you a short video about that now, and then why we're talking about hyper-personalization today. The Barclays Fintech Venture Studio, powered by Rainmaking, was launched last year. Our mission is to ideate, quickly prototype, and support to scale innovative new products and services. We do that through collaboration with internal teams, corporate clients, and fintechs.
Well, Rainmaking is one of the world's leading corporate innovation and venture development firms. We work with corporates and startups to solve some of the biggest problems and build for the future.
Financial services is undergoing huge seismic shifts. We've created our first innovation thesis, the future of money, finance, and banking, to identify the drivers behind those seismic shifts and the themes that we think will create the most impact in the next 3 to 5 years.
Customer expectations are shifting, accelerated by digitalization. At the same time, demographic changes are resulting in new and emerging customer segments. Innovative technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning are now reaching commercial maturity. That's been made possible by the exponential growth of data availability and range. As a result, we have a number of new business models being built on top of that data, which are rewriting market dynamics.
In the Fintech Venture Studio, we've been following embedded finance for some time. And what we've seen, obviously, in the market is this huge impact that embedded finance has had for an end consumer when they're in a digital experience and they need to pay for something, or they want access to point of sale finance. It's been a game changer, there's no question. The next level of embedded finance is really, how do we contextualize that experience for the end consumer? How do we really support that? But we also are looking at this from a banking perspective. And as a bank, it's really important to protect the data policies and data privacy of an individual and embed that privacy within the journey. So in the Fintech Venture Studio, that's what we're really diving into. In the B2B sector, we're also seeing embedded finance have a real impact. If you think through the different verticals that are coming through in the industries that we're seeing that are now being digitized, we're seeing tech stacks being developed in agriculture, in healthcare, and they've been around in the creative industry for some time. When we're thinking through embedded finance, we really want to think through how we can serve those SMEs in those sectors better by embedding their needs and services within that experience.
In the future, how will businesses and customers interact with money, whether that's traditional or new digital currencies? How can we improve and deliver a better finance experience in a more personalized and embedded way so that more customers can have access to finance and be able to build savings and wealth? How can we harness technology to build the bank of the future that can fuel and deliver this transformation?
We created this thesis to highlight the areas of focus for the Fintech Venture Studio. If you're a Fintech, corporate, or VC that has a solution in this space, we want to hear from you. Thank you very much. I didn't realize how awkward it would be sitting next to myself on screen, so appreciate that. And please go online to download the thesis. But as you heard there, something that we're really excited about is hyper-personalization within the context of embedded finance. And as we started thinking through that opportunity, we really quickly came against the barrier of data privacy and how do we tackle that as a bank. So today, please help me welcome our incredible panel. So we have Jeremy Brown from Anthemis, a principal at Anthemis, Navrina Singh, founder and CEO of Credo AI, and Zohar, founder and CEO of One Creation. So guys, could you just introduce yourselves and a quick line about your company, starting with Jeremy?
Hi, nice to be here. I'm Jeremy. I'm an investor at Anthemis. We're a 1.5 billion AUM venture fund. We invest early stage all the way through growth stage and also pre-IPO, so essentially all the way until the company goes public. I specifically sit on our seed stage investment vehicle as well as our early growth vehicle. And we have very much an embedded finance thesis as well too. So we invest in sort of pure play, I call them fintech and insurtechs, but also more and more you'll see a lot of sort of embedded finance applications in energy, mobility, supply chain and logistics, construction, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. I'm Navrina Singh, founder and CEO of Credo AI. Super excited to be here from the Bay Area. If I say anything which is wrong, it's because I'm jet lagged. If I say something brilliant, it's me. So let's keep it that way. So Credo AI is a very young AI startup. We started about 3 years ago, and we are building industry's first AI governance platform. And what that means is we help you provide complete oversight and accountability of your machine learning and AI applications, including generative AI. So a couple of things about the platform. We help you build compliant, fair, secure, transparent artificial intelligence, which is not only compliant with existing standards, emerging regulations, but also with your company policies. And as you can imagine, and we'll be talking more about it today, why that is super critical in this hyper-personalization world that we are already in.
Hi everyone, my name is Zohar. I'm the founder of One Creation. And One Creation basically is a embedded privacy solution that allows corporations to actually take the data that they collect on you, the user, and actually change the control of that data or delegate back the control of that data to you in order to create a customer-centric business model using privacy.
Great, so let's kick off with the first question. So as a bank, we're very conscious of how we treat people's data and data privacy. But does a customer really care about data privacy in their journey? So to you, Zohar, what do you think?
Well, I have two statements before I'll ask a question of the crowd. Okay, but the first statement is, I don't know how many of you know, but cookies are going away, or the use of cookies is going away. And I would say that I look at privacy as a tool to create trust. And trust is really what we're missing in relationship to our corporations. And then I'll ask a question. Out of all the members here in the room, how many of you use an Apple device? Great. All of you, I would say the statistics show that 96 to 99% of you have actually blocked all applications on your mobile device using the Apple privacy tool. So whether they care or not, it was because we never thought that we had a tool to actually do something about it. So we capitulated to the social dilemma because we couldn't use the service unless we didn't accept, right? So now the tools are changing, and basically what we're thinking is that you will be able to, people do care, and especially the younger generation does care. From 18 to 44, our research shows they care a lot more. There's still always going to be privacy active and privacy passive people, but given the tools, we think a lot more are going to care and do something about it.
And so do you think that this is something that brands should be really thinking about from a brand protection perspective beyond what regulators are going to say?
Right. So always when people come to me, I start by saying that to do what we allow you to do should not only be motivated by regulation. It's about, Navrina said, it's about the ethical thing to do. What's the right way in our relationship with the user and how we treat their data? If we do things ethically, we can actually achieve more loyalty, more trust, and most importantly, better business insights, which every corporation likes to differentiate themselves using better business insights. So all in all, I think that if we change that business model of stealing your data, or not really stealing, but putting it in page 227 of the privacy notice, that we're actually collecting your GPS location. If I knew about this and I was rewarded for that, I think the model would change and you will gain a lot more than the current model.
Okay. And so before we dive into ethics and regulation, which is an interesting topic, Jeremy, I wanted to ask you a quick question on how do you see this playing out across the value chain? Because you've got this great view across the value chain from fintechs to corporates and multiple players. So do you think there are still some barriers like data silos that are stopping that kind of financial inclusion and support for what Zohar's saying?
Yeah, I do. I think with respect to data silos, it's to some extent you can argue that it's preventing innovative products getting to market, especially for early stage companies. And so, when I think about the wave of helping the underbanked or facilitating access to credit, all these things we've seen emerge in fintechs and tackling these problems over the past 10 years. But because of sort of these silos, how far can we actually go? And also when I was thinking about sort of these data silos as well too, especially when we're thinking about sort of diversity and inclusion and sort of access to data, AI in itself can have biases, and so you need to have greater access to data in order to not have bias in your model, to take in different demographic information or social class, whatever the case might be. So I think if we can move to more of a ethical way of breaking down kind of these barriers, it will lead to more fintechs in the future emerging to tackle the problems that we're still trying to solve.
Okay. And are there any other big barriers that you're seeing beyond data silos that could also stop that, or is that the biggest one?
Well, I think there's always barriers to access to capital, especially for founders, especially at the pre-seed stage. I think there's still barriers in terms of where you went to school versus you just have a really good idea and you want to build a really cool product. I mean, I think the list goes on and on.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that in another panel.
We'll do that in another panel.
I'd like to add something. Yes, data silos are a barrier, but when you think about it, regulations, at least in the UK and Europe and other places in Southeast Asia, are actually, if you look at the curve for regulations, it's moving towards give the customer a lot more control and transparency over their data. And it seems like some of these regulations are sometimes ahead of what the companies are actually voluntarily doing, because they're still in the mindset of being your data owner rather than your custodian.
Yeah.
And that's a big, big difference. And I think that mindset is also a barrier for.
So Navrina, that's a really great point. And your view into the fragmented way that regulation is being implemented across different countries is fascinating. And I think the rise of generative AI in the last 6 months has really shone a light on that. Could you please tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and the differences in how it's being implemented?
Absolutely. And I think before I address that, I want to go back to the first question you asked, Zohar, because I think that was a really critical question as to who cares about privacy. We are living in an age of conflict. As a user, so when I'm on Amazon and I have a 9-year-old and I'm exhausted and it shows me a wine bottle, of course I'm going to buy it. It knows what I like, right? But when I am not getting the credit limit that I should be getting just because I'm a woman and generally I've not had the financial track record that my husband might have, that's when I'm pissed off. So I think there's something that we have to pay attention to is, as a consumer, we want privacy to serve us. So sometimes we'll embrace it and sometimes we will not. Having said that, I do want to underscore the comments made earlier that especially in this new age of artificial intelligence, I'm a firm believer that the businesses and brands that are going to emerge as leaders are the ones who put privacy first, are the ones who take the customer's data very seriously, are the ones who are guardians of it and understand when to use it, when not to use it, how much to be transparent, how much not to be transparent. So I did want to underscore that because that is what we are seeing in the global regulation. So just a little bit by way of background, I've spent the past 20 years building AI products, but over the past, especially 6 years, got really intrigued by this idea of, how are these technologies, especially the ones that are moving so fast, like foundation models, how are they going to be sort of put in place, if you will? How are we going to create guardrails? So past 6 years, I've been very active in the policy ecosystem. I currently sit on the National AI Advisory Council, which advises President Biden in the United States around AI regulations, very active in the European Commission with the EU AI Act and with some of the other governments as well. So talking about, what is the core theme that ties all the emerging regulations, all the emerging responsible AI frameworks, it is privacy. It is data use. It is data governance. It is obviously a lot of discussions that we're going to have later on in this panel around ethical use and responsibility. They all are like sort of underscored by the need for making sure that as countries, as regulators, as policymakers, as companies, we all not only have the similar definition of privacy, but we are very seriously taking, the use of consumer data in the right way.
And so, do you think it's an arms race? Is there like a race from each country to figure this out so that they can get the biggest commercial opportunity from this?
Yes, it's an arms race. I'm actually here speaking to some of the regulators and the UK government around some of the AI regulations. What has happened, especially with respect to artificial intelligence and machine learning in the past, I would say 5 to 6 years, is, Europe has taken a very active stand in terms of how they're going to be regulating. And the EU AI Act is a testament to the risk-based approach that Europe is planning to take. US is mostly fragmented. We don't have a federal legislation that mandates how AI should be governed or not governed. But going back to the competition as well as the allyship between the two countries, there is this need to sort of align on what this global good regulation looks like and what that means for financial services. And then on the other side, if you look at China, China has actually surprisingly been very, very active in regulating artificial intelligence, and but they are sort of trying to serve the country values that they have, unlike the democratic values that we all sort of ascribe to in US and in Europe. So certainly an arms race going on. I would say this year and next year is going to be very critical to see what happens.
So this letter that was published, very famously by like all the big tech CEOs to say, pause, let's figure this out. Is that really what's happening, or is this just a way for corporates to kind of get ahead of the game or get ahead of China and how we want to approach it?
So we didn't sign the letter. So I'll share my perspective from that point of view. The letter that Sonal is referring to is a letter that was recently signed and published by Future of Life Institute, and it was signed by Elon Musk and Yosha Bengio, some amazing leaders, especially Yosha, who I really respect a lot. And the premise of that letter was that there needs to be a pause on some of these large-scale language models and foundation models, just so that we can all take a beat and understand how to put guardrails. And there was some great text around how do you put those guardrails. The issue is the genie is out of the bottle. So trying to put it back is not going to serve anybody, and it's actually going to be causing a lot of competitive threats for countries. We firmly believe that right now is a time to focus on AI governance and guardrails, rather than trying to pause technology development. Like, when has that happened, right?
And also Elon just signed the letter, but then a few weeks later came up with a new AI competition, competition company to the ChatGPT. So look what they do, not what they say.
So on that point, Zohar, do you think regulation should guide corporates, or corporates should have their own ethical framework? And how do we know, if everyone's using the same ethical framework as consumers?
Well, I think that what should drive first and foremost corporations is profit, okay? But if you could do that ethically, then you've got something really as as an advantage. So I'll give you an example. Most corporations today produce a product and sell it to you, and the amount of privacy feedback or any feedback that you get from those users is very minimal. It's what we call a linear business. You know, it goes from production of something towards you. New platforms like Amazon and eBay and all those created more multi-channel type of businesses that multiple people are on the same platform. But really what's missing is the ability to get the end user to give a feedback loop and to create a network business model rather than a linear business model. And privacy is actually the best place to get that feedback from the customers. So if corporations, you know, with the regulations and do it ethically, would be able to give the end user a lot more control of what he's doing and a lot more say in the game, I believe that that's the first step to establish trust, and that's the ethical way of doing it. And that's what should drive corporations. The ethical way to create profits, not necessarily what the regulators have asked us, and then might have a byproduct that will not create a very ethical environment for the customer.
And I don't know if Navrina, you might have an answer to this. Like from a consumer perspective, how do we know what we're being told that the corporate is doing and how they're treating our data is in fact an ethical framework that we can get behind?
So I'm trying to address this question. One, I really appreciate your remarks. I don't agree with many of those, but that's okay, because if we both agreed, this wouldn't be a fun panel, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of things. One is I don't believe that businesses should be driven only by profit, and businesses are driven by sustainable growth. And yes, profits is a component of it. And we are seeing that more and more now in this age of AI, that as businesses are thinking about the sustainable growth, how do you deliver value to stakeholders who are involved, whether it's an employee or your board or your shareholders? That is becoming really paramount in this new world of AI. So I did want to highlight that I don't agree with the statement on profits. Having said that, I think there's another perspective that enterprises need to really sort of subscribe to, and we are seeing this quite extensively. I think there's a need for public-private partnership. And partnership sometimes can be like, oh, there's no action. It's just like people getting together, having this kumbaya moment, regulators going their way, businesses going their way, and nothing great comes out of it. And I would say the past 3 years are actually proving that wrong. We have seen at national level, whether it's in the United States or in Europe or in UK or Canada and Singapore, that really for the first time, enterprises are coming together with the policymakers and regulators because they are recognizing that there is an oversight deficit. And we all are finally recognizing that as a technologist, I don't understand, risk management or compliance or policy making. Policymakers are recognizing they don't understand artificial intelligence. So we cannot continue moving forward and trying to create that sustainable business goal if we all don't come to the table. So we at Credo AI, even though we are a tiny startup, very mighty one, we are showing up in all these policy ecosystems. One, to show how good governance really looks like in practice by providing these oversight and accountability tools. But the second is we are also learning what does good policy making really look like and contributing back to that.
So Jeremy, I mean, this conversation here playing out is exactly what we kind of grapple with as a corporate. Like, what comes first? How do we manage it? Are you seeing those conversations escalating with your LPs? And I mean, I'll start with that one first, and then I'll ask the next one.
Well, I would say as a fund, we do have a fiduciary responsibility to return the capital that our LPs invest. So that's like that's what I'm thinking about every single day. Every company that we're evaluating, it's can this drive returns for the fund? With respect to sort of ethics and I want to group sort of when we talk about ethics and data privacy, I'm actually going to throw ESG in there because that's really important as well too. That comes up every single day. So with every company that we invest in, we sort of have to make a little small case or a large case around the impact and the ESG. And then also this is kind of looped into this. And this is something that all of our LPs are demanding as well too. What is your thesis? Okay, embedded finance thesis, that's great, but we see the world heading in this, one direction. How are you sort of thinking about ethics, data privacy, ESG going forward? how's that going to impact your ultimate, investment decisions in the startups that you're investing in, regardless of if it becomes a unicorn or not. And so that's a conversation that, I think we as a fund, but also as venture investors, I don't know one fund that's not sort of having this conversation on a daily or weekly basis.
That's so interesting, because if you look into the media, you're seeing massive headlines of huge investment going into generative AI, huge investment going into AI and ML. I'm not seeing any headlines going, huge investment going into data privacy tools. Although Zohar's looking for that, so.
Well, I would actually say that, in my opinion, it should be ESGP. There needs to be a privacy factor in all of those decisions. And yes, currently the P is under the G in terms of governance, but it's not the same, right? Governance is one thing from the corporation side. My privacy is another thing. So corporations that are actively looking for ESG, compliance and get the higher scores should consider privacy as the same and another, just another category that they need to comply to.
And are you seeing that playing out from an investor community? Are VCs hunting for the equivalent gains to be made? Side by side, we're investing in AI and we're investing in data privacy tools.
Yeah, I would say it's a subcategory. So it's not in itself, we're going to invest in data privacy or have a specific, thesis on that, but it'd be a sub-thesis to generative AI or, some other vertical that we do have a really robust thesis on.
Okay. So, I think, when we were talking beforehand, it was really clear that one of the solutions to how you can commercialize these tools and this great technology while actually being aware of what your customers are looking for and how to appease shareholders, regulators, etc., is actually baking in data privacy into the model of how you're putting out the opportunities and the different products and services. So I'd like to turn now to thinking about what industry is doing this well. And I know you guys have great oversight on that as well. So starting with you, Jeremy, where are you seeing examples of companies who are really doing something innovative with data, but also doing it in an ethical way, who we can learn from?
So one of our investments is a company called GreenSpark. And so what GreenSpark is doing is essentially targeting SMEs, so not so much big companies, but they're enabling employers to do carbon offsets for their employees. Carbon offsets and also kind of plastic usage. So they're collecting a lot of data, the employers on, travel, on commuting to work, so that they can go back to GreenSpark, so that GreenSpark can then enable their employer to, do the effective offsets to make the company net zero, essentially. So I think that's a really great example around kind of using data in a private way that's enabling sort of a greater good in terms of helping each of these small, medium enterprises get to some level of carbon neutrality.
I mean, climate's a great example of an industry where huge amounts of data needed to be understood, parsed before we can move forward into what we're going to do to mitigate that. So Navrina, are you seeing that playing out in your space?
No. And so, there's been a massive shift in the past, I would say 6 weeks to 8 weeks. All the commitments made by many of the large tech players and organizations across the world around carbon neutral by 2030 is all being thrown out of the window. And the reason it's being thrown out of the window is if you look at the compute cost and the energy consumption by some of these large language models, which now are being extensively used, I mean, no way can we meet these carbon commitments that many organizations have made by 2030. So is there effort? Yes, there is very little effort, and I would like to see more of it. Is there a way to bring responsibility and accountability? Absolutely, and that's what we are working on right now. And then I also do want to underscore that within the investor community, we have started to see a need for looking at, especially if you're looking at startups and early stage companies, looking at how they are, sort of responsibly either developing or procuring or using artificial intelligence, or if you're an investor in some of the, big public organizations requiring disclosures around how you are making responsible AI investments. So I think we are seeing a combination. I am excited about the little bit work that we are seeing, but a lot more needs to happen to be able to, this ESGP, I'll add RA to it, which is responsible and accountability. I think there's a lot of other letters we can add to this, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the action that these companies need to bring, and that's very little right now.
So who's doing it? Yeah, go ahead, Zohar. Go on.
I just wanted to give a couple of real examples. So about a year ago, we worked with the World Economic Forum to do a project in India, I believe it was. And the intent was also, there was a problem there where the information coming from crops, or how much did you produce in crops for your local farm, was getting twisted by middlemen because they wanted to take advantage and get more water. So if your crop was lower, you would get more allocation of water. And this, finagling of the data caused a lot of places to either experience drought or not to get the right resources for the, agriculture, for the farmers. So if you can create a situation where the farmer is in control of his data, and there's no middleman, and there's direct and immutable type of reporting of data back to the government, then you could get a much fairer allocation of water. So that's a real example of where data could be actually used in order to get better allocation. And you can reward the farmer with, 100 rupees just for being able to report that once a month or once a quarter. The second one, I'll give you something more theoretical. And imagine that you had some sort of an affinity and you wanted to get in better shape or something like that. And you can actually use data and share your wearable data with maybe your consumer electronics producer or your local produce manufacturer. If you were able to be in the position where you were willing to share some of that really private data, then the service that can be provided to you creates an ecosystem where you're incentivized to continue with this diet and continue sharing sensitive data on your diet with multiple partners. So my point in this in saying is that there are really valid use cases that if people take privacy and incorporate and embed it as part of their business model, can actually generate a lot more new revenue, or just loyal customers that feel a lot more trustworthy of what you're trying to offer them.
Sonal, may I offer some of the harms, because I love these positive stories, but I think one of the things that ends up happening unintentionally is when this causes unintended consequences for different ethnicities, for different minority groups. So Credo AI, for example, works across 5 sectors: finance and insurance, high tech, government, HR. And I'll give you 2 examples too, because as we are thinking about personalization and hyper-personalization, is super critical to understand how you're sourcing this data, what kind of testing have you done on this data, are you really making sure that the outcomes are serving the end consumers, and how are you making sure that's happening? So as an example, in hiring, and I'll give you a very specific recent regulation passed by the New York City, which is demanding that organizations that are based in New York City, whether you are developing or buying third-party automated decision-making systems, you might be any industry sector. You could be a financial sector, you could be retail. But if you're using any of these hiring systems to make a determination on who to hire, it's going to be critical for you by starting July 5th this year to do a fairness audit. And the reason that they're doing that fairness audit is we've seen time and time again that certain ethnicities or minority groups have been left out of the conversation and not been receiving the jobs that they should be. And case in point was the Amazon algorithm in 2018. It was interesting because I was at Microsoft that time and we were testing it out. And what was fascinating was women were never recommended as good engineers, or even engineers, let alone. So I obviously take offense to that as a hardware engineer. But I think the point is, I like the hyper-personalization. It does serve me well. But going back to the comment I made earlier, the age of conflict is really real. Sometimes it doesn't work for us. We see this day in, day out with our financial services clients on fraud models, on credit, on underwriting models, in insurance with life insurance, where Hispanic and Asians are not receiving the insurance premiums that others are receiving. So I think we have to be really careful about this hyper-personalization and this privacy. Even if I give consent to using my data, how is that data being used and how are decisions being made?
I think, and just getting my mind going on this in terms of when we're talking about fairness, when we're talking going back to like data silos, then it's a question becomes to what extent when we're training these AI models are we using synthetic data versus real world data, which is very hard to access. And I think that's you see actually quite a few startups trying to tackle sort of this problem with respect to fairness via synthetic data. So I'm curious, as an investor in sort of monitoring the startup landscape, how that's going to evolve and change over the coming years here.
Yeah, and synthetic data doesn't take into account all those nuances quite often, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is there is commercial opportunity, but there's misaligned incentives across the value chain. Mm-hmm. To support making sure that we are doing the right thing and we're getting the right products out to the right people, we need to make sure that it's auditable and trackable and that we can go back and change those models where and if necessary. And we understand the models that we're using, which is hugely important. And also that we need to be investing in the future of what this could look like, right? We can't put our head in the sand. We can't go, oh, we'll figure it out when it gets here and when it's like a model that other people have tested. Actually, no, we need to be, as a corporate, really strong in our ethical framework and how we're implementing it so that we can serve our customers to the best of our ability. So, I mean, what a great panel that we put together. It's fascinating. So, we're going to open up the floor for questions, but as a last question for you guys, I'd like to ask, what do you think are the opportunities for corporates such as Barclays? If we get this right, what can we unlock? So to you first, Zohar.
Well, even in places where regulation is not really passed and is slow to pass, like the United States, I just saw, coming from the United States, an advertisement for Discovery Financial. And they were basically saying, we will remove your name from Zoom info as a reward for we're better. So you can actually see that people are spending marketing money to differentiate their offerings using the notion of privacy. But really I go back to my first statement, it's all about trust. So the opportunity is to create a trusting relationship with your customer in which you're not hiding anything for him and there's a value exchange as it relates to their relationship. And when you think about the future of where technology is going and Web3 and all those, the Internet of Me, well, eventually, supposedly, if we get the architecture right, it will be only our control to decide where we're going to use and share our data. So the faster corporations like Barclays get to that position where they can actually differentiate their offering by giving more control and trust to their customers, the better benefits and more insights and more opportunities you'll have.
Navrina?
I don't think we should aspire for getting it right because we won't. I think what we should aspire for is being responsible. And one of the things that, responsibility, and I do agree with the point, one of the ways to building that trust is by taking responsibility for your actions. So whether it is regulation, which is promoting transparency, explanations, it's promoting oversight, and it's promoting accountability, that is not actually what we are seeing as a driving force for organizations to bring in governance and to start thinking about privacy. What we are seeing right now is organizations bringing in tools like Credo AI to actually create that trust. And the trust is going to be created if very transparently you as a company say, hey, by the way, here are all the 10 places I'm using machine learning and generative AI. And here are the ways that I am putting guardrails because there are no standards and there are future emerging regulations that we are not aware of. And based on what we know today, this is how we are performing against it. Guess what? This is not right. This is not perfect, but this is what we are holding ourselves accountable to. And that's where, Sonal, we are seeing a lot of great outcome where companies are able to retain customers longer. They are able to go through procurement cycles faster. They're able to actually keep their employees very happy. And so I think in this new world of AI first, bringing responsibility rather than focusing on being right is the path forward.
Thank you. Jeremy?
I would just say as a VC investor, there's a sense of duty to an extent, just because we're sitting at the entry point or the seed of where everything's being built, and so it's a very powerful conversation that we can have as venture investors and also early stage founders that can really drive that discussion at the higher level, at the Barclayses of the world.
Yeah.
That would not only be there for like maybe acquisitions, which would be great for all venture investors, of course, but then also kind of implementing everything within their own sort of business units and functions.
Thank you, guys. You've got three powerhouses in front of you, so any questions from the audience? One over there. David?
First of all, thank you very much for your time. In the United States, our government is looking to really protect consumers from discrimination and other unintended consequences. But however, with data, we can really prove underserved, underbanked opportunities if we have the data. So this is I want to know your thoughts about allowing a consumer to opt in to give more privacy, to provide more data, to provide more insights for new creative loan products or financial products. And any thoughts about your conversations with governments to empower the consumer to form more empowerment and be in control of their privacy? Because although well-intended guardrails and information that the states has, globally, there's less guardrails and then there's more data, and therefore there's potentially more opportunities. Not necessarily that's in practice, but I just want to know what your thoughts were, because it's kind of a combination of your two topics.
No, absolutely. And I think some of the things you're referring to, David, thanks for asking that question, is recent announcements by CFPB, right? So, which is the Consumer Protection Bureau in United States, and they've been very vocal about how you have to use data in service of ensuring that consumers are treated fairly. And again, just a side note, there are 34 definitions of fairness within the AI ecosystem. In financial sector, there is not one clear definition of fairness, and that's why getting it right is very difficult. So yes, you are right. So a couple of things that are happening, especially to manage this conflict, if you will, is first really understanding, is there an opportunity for synthetic data? So we are seeing, especially in certain fraud scenarios, that there could be synthetic data use, which can actually serve the purpose of doing the testing as well as independent auditing. The second thing is, yes, user consumer consent, super important, but then being very transparent around what are the guardrails. How long are you going to retain the data? What is that data going to be used for? When are you going to destroy the data? What are you not going to be using that data for? So this is where the transparency disclosures and impact assessments are becoming super critical, and something that we are pushing pretty hard for in United States. So hopefully that gives you a little bit color, but happy to discuss further as well.
Total agreement, by the way, as Navrina was actually describing what the consent is, you could go to our booth and see it's exactly what you just described. Very simple, not 227 pages, 5 lines. What am I going to use your data for? What am I going to reward you for? How long is very important, because that established trust, right? So how can I create a mechanism that if I gave you the data for 5 minutes, you're actually going to use it only for 5 minutes? And then if I'm sure of that, then I can be trustworthy of your service. We consider trust, we call it the 3 C's. It's control, clarity, and comfort, where the time is the comfort.
Time for one more question.
Navrina, you mentioned that, the genie's out of the bottle. So what are we going to do? How are we going to, I guess, force the acceleration that's needed so we don't end up with a massive global disaster on our hands?
That's something that keeps me up at night. So again, I'll keep going back to the thing around, there's 3 ways I think we can see. One is obviously governance guardrails. Really having an understanding, like even within Barclays, we were part of the RISE program very early on in our journey, and so thankful for that. But really, like one of the things we loved about Barclays was really a clear understanding of where machine learning and AI makes sense and where it does not make sense. I think starting with something as simple as that is a great starting point. But the second thing is really around understanding how do you bring that holistic standardized governance, and what are you putting guardrails around? And then the last one is transparency, right? How do you disclose that to your different stakeholders? The challenge that we are seeing right now, especially with generative AI, maybe with a show of hands, how many of you are using generative AI, playing with generative AI already? Wow, I expected more, but given my 9-year-old is like literally using it on a daily basis. So I would say there are a lot of unknowns with foundation models that we just don't understand. We are finally scratching the surface. For example, Credo AI has launched a product, which is the Generative AI Trust Toolkit. But within that, unlike traditional machine learning, we only have like 2 or 3 risks we are able to manage: IP leakage, copyright infringement. But as you can imagine, we've been discussing factuality, hallucinations where these systems just go off rails. Very difficult to figure out how are we going to even govern these risks. These are like brand new risks that the world is getting exposed to. And then national security risks like are prevalent. So I think one of the things, this is where public-private partnership becomes really critical, but also really understanding where you are going to be using things like generative AI versus where you're going to be creating sandboxes and not allowing use. And we are seeing that pretty extensively within our customers right now.
Thank you so much. Great questions. And unfortunately, we are at time. So, we're very lucky to call Zohar and Navrina alumni of our programs. And Anthemis is a GP for a fund that we run together on embedded finance and supporting female founders. So you can see the kind of quality of conversation that we inspire and we hope to have through our Fintech Venture Studio. We don't just look at things on the surface. We deeply think about it. Think about the opportunity, the risk, and really the commercial way that we can bring to light this new technology that we're seeing. So if you're a founder, if you're a corporate partner, please come and talk to us. Everyone's outside in the tunnel over there. And please, a big round of applause for our panel today.